Hey, how's it going, you guys? Welcome back to Hello Lady. We are jumping straight back into Eru Takazaki's route. We are going to finish it today. I don't care how long it is. Okay, well, if it's super long, I'm going to split it up. But if it's reasonably long, I'm going to do it. I want to know what's going on with Saku. We had that big reveal there at the end. Very exciting stuff. And then we still have to figure out how our relationship with Eru is developing. I feel like this has been a very different route because the other two routes were very clear on their love for each other, right? And I feel like Eru and I are like, I don't know, kind of close, but like more in like a brother and sister way than I feel like we would be lovers. So I'm curious to see how they're going to build upon that relationship, if they're going to actually like go through with it, or if we're just going to kind of stay how we are. So let's continue on here. It was after dark, but I still returned to Tokino Yomise's compartment because it was the best place to discuss secrets.
めぼしい成果はあったかね。
おかえりしんちゃん。あれからいくつか分かったことがある。
Oh, frick, really? What did you learn?
どうやら時の先生は奥島で多くの HMI が死んでいるのは何らかの人為によるもので、その犯人はスクールに潜伏していると考えていたようだ。
Okay. I mean, I think we kind of know who it is, or at least know who would know who it is.
それらしいメモや書き取りがいくつかありました。
さすがは時の女子と言うべきなのだろうね。
Yeah, I do wonder how much other secrets she was hiding. Obviously, we've learned about a lot, but I'd be curious to know what else is going on at the school. It seems she had approached the truth.
それと、さっきメールが届いていたが、見たかい？
まだだが、内容は？
一つは、鍵石義雄について。昨日の深夜、市内で目撃されていた。おそらく、殺される直前だろ
う。どうして直前だとわかる？
逃げていたからだよ。目撃の証言によると、何かに追われているようだったと。追っていた相手は、残念ながら見ていない。
追って殺したか。狐狩りだな。ノーブルの趣味としては真っ当だ。
ここの資料で分かったが、2065事件以降に事故死した連中も死ぬ直前、何かに追われていた。死に顔は皆ひどいものだった。
Okay, so real quick, I want to bring this up. So before, in the common route, right, when, Takashi Hanazono, that's his name, when he was getting chased by some kind of beast-like figure. So I always assumed that was one of the SSDs, right? Is it entirely possible that that was Saku? Or somebody like that? Maybe they've been controlling her in some way and having her do these kind of things? Because I feel like there's a different side of Saku that we just haven't seen yet, that we just kind of saw in the last episode. And I want to know, was that the SSD or was that Saku? I mean, this is making me rethink some of the events that I thought I knew pretty well, and maybe I didn't.
殺すために追ったのではなく、追って殺すのが目的だったと。
殺すためだとすれば、やり口が雑すぎる。意図的に追い回したとしか思えないが、意味がわからない。HMI を相手に、そんな余裕は自殺行為だろ？絶対の自信か、それとも、自分の死にも破綻しているか。
Or both.
どちらにせよ、人知れず続いてきた HMI 殺しと、昨夜の何がし殺しは、同じ犯人の仕業ということだな。
I mean, yeah, I would think it's safe to assume.
偶然の一致という可能性も消えたわけじゃないが。
先ほど一つと言ったが、二つ目もあるのかね。
Tagi nodded as though tired or resigned.
草芝田への遺体が発見された。古町川に浮かんでいたのが見つかった。死因は溺死だ。それも2週間以上前に。
Oh. Okay. So we've been looking for someone we wouldn't be able to find.
二人の HMI を殺したスライダーが 実は川に落ちて死んでいたというのかね。因果応報というにも無様すぎるな。そんな結末では喜劇としても三流だ。
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds like it's a little too big of a coincidence.
本当に草芝太が殺したなら。
Yeah, she could have just took the fall for it.
タイが2人の HMI 候補を殺した証拠があるわけじゃない。彼女は姿を消しただけだ。他の2人が死体で発見されただけだ。
I mean, she could have vanished because she was killed. And so people just assumed. Like, gosh, is this really Saku? Like, I'm still... A part of me still doesn't want to blame Saku. Like, I just don't see her doing that. And it's like, maybe there's just another part of her I never realized, you know? Maybe it's been foreshadowed a little bit. I just went over my head. So the culprit could have killed all three and hidden Tai Kushashiba's body to distract the Academy's trackers. Surely I was being overly suspicious.
昨夜の事件の犯人は分かった。
Taigi, you don't look too surprised by that. Eru looks a little more surprised, but Taigi, I think, not so much. I wonder why that is. There was no point in dragging it out any longer, so I simply revealed the truth.
犯人はサクだ。
Taigi's still not too shocked by it. Eru's going to be shocked by this. I don't think she's going to believe me. In response, Taigi closed his eyes while Eru glared at me. It felt as though time had stopped for a moment due to the silence.
何たちの悪い冗談言ってやがりますかこの野郎。言っていいことと悪いことがありますよ。
Yeah, that's kind of the response I was expecting from Eru. I'm just curious why Taigi is not too surprised by it, though. I mean, I know she's been kind of acting suspicious, and she could... You know, she had the time to do it. She's been kind of doing other things.
私は常日頃から言うべき時に言うべきことしか言っていないつもりだよ。
Yeah, I don't think Narita would joke about something like that. Her body failed to maintain her expressionless facade. There we go, I'm trying to remember how to pronounce it. Eru's face remained blank, but I could clearly tell that she was mad as she approached me.
確証があるんですか？目的も動機も何もないじゃないですか。いい加減な思いつきとかなら殺す。
Eru, you gotta trust me a little bit. I'm not just gonna throw that out there as a joke.
8割といったところだ。
Yeah, it is entirely possible that she's like covering for somebody. I could see her doing that, but I just don't think I know her very well, apparently. That was a lie. I was fully certain. The situation and my instincts both pointed me to a single truth. A truth that was hard to swallow as a proper conclusion.
2065事件も
そうだ。
時期を考えればスクールに来た当初から彼女はずっとそうだったことになる。少なくとも40人近い HMI 候補と HMI をただ一人で殺害し続けてきたと。
Well, it kind of sounds like that.
そうだ。
Saku Otonashi had murdered all those people. And there was little point in asking why, since it had already happened. She'd spent all those years since Incident 206 meticulously planning and carrying out murders.
馬鹿げてます。推測ばかりで証拠もなしに。
物的証拠はあると言ったら。
Oh, Taigi, so maybe he's kind of thought this for a bit.
何ふざけてんですか。ボンボン、探偵ごっこなんてやってると閉めますよ。
詳しく聞こう。
Taigi reached into his chest pocket and pulled out a plastic case that was about half as large as a box of tobacco. It was meant for chemistry experiments and was used to collect samples.
これは少し珍しいスギゴケ類の胞子だ。スクールには生えていない種で、1本目のサンプルは野外実証試験の時、奥島市内で採取したもの。
Hair moss? That's kind of gross. Are we talking about someone's actual hair, or is that just like the kind of moss it is?
2本目はサクの靴についた微量の土から見つけた。
Wait, when the frick did you check her shoes? It's kind of weird, but I'll allow it.
そんなの野外実証試験の時に。
サクの靴から採取したのは半月ほど前だよ。
Half a month, in other words, around the time Tai Kushashiba vanished. Dun dun dun.
大義は寮に来てからずっとそうやってこそこそ調べ回ってたんですか？
So interesting. I feel like I was very wrong about Taiki. I always thought of him as kind of like this guy who was out to maybe get us and just kind of a mean guy. But I don't know, maybe he's on our side. Maybe he's just been doing all this research in every route and we just never realized it. Like maybe he's always like kind of thought this. And now we're like finally at this part where we're connecting it.
それと一本目を見つけたのは奥島市内と言ったがね。具体的には草柴多江が殺したとされている2人の遺体が発見された近くだ。
そんなの
She repeatedly tried to deny it, losing more and more certainty. Eventually, she simply fell silent, hung her head, and walked to the locker in the corner of the room. I mean, yeah, this has got to be a big blow for Eru. Like, I mean, she looks up to Saku so much. She looked dejected in the same manner as a normal girl. It wasn't like her to let sadness overwhelm her, so I had no words of comfort. To her, the truth behind the incidents and the Academy's secrets meant nothing. Only Saku mattered. What was the use of consoling her there? We had to confront Saku, the only person Eru wished to protect.
もちろん、全てが偶然だという可能性は残っているよ。
Unlikely. If what he had just said was true, Taigi had suspected Saku all along. He could have easily singled her out long ago. Perhaps he wanted to bet that he was wrong, to cling to that small hope. That was true for myself as well. I wanted to believe. Doing my best to ignore Eru's sorry state, I walked up to Taigi. Then I brought my face so close that our foreheads almost touched and looked straight into his eyes as to not miss his reactions.
このスクールではオンスロート症をどう処理している？
どういう意味かな、しんちゃん。
言葉通りの意味だ。大義、お前が言ったことだ。スクールはオンスロート症の危険を熟知している。だからこそ学生に対しては秘匿されている。これは確率論だ。35% のスライダーか、それと同じだ。
Wait, Narita, are you implying that she has this syndrome? Is that why you're bringing this up? Maybe because she has something like that, it makes her do these kind of things?
スクールが HMI を集めれば一定数のオンスロートが出現するだろう。ならば対策していないはずがない。オンスロート症はスライダー化の何倍も危険だ。しかし伝染を避けるために存在を公にはできない。サクたちクラウンに対処させることもできない。真実を知れば彼女たち自身が感染し制御を失うかもしれないからだ。では
さあ、そんな話は一度も聞いていない。
Really? I'm kind of surprised by that.
人知れず間引いているのではないのか？
Like, for example, Mitori Kabutayama. What if one of the reasons for the Academy's high-tech invasive observation of its student body was to find all those showing signs of onslaught infection? If Eru was right, the devil descended. HMIs with onslaught syndrome were real monsters. If one appeared, merely stopping them required massive sacrifices. The tragedy at the Takazaki household was proof of that. How did they handle them then? Increasing prevention and quickly disposing of anyone who showed signs of transformation made the most sense. There's no room for emotion or consideration there.
わからない。
So I'm trying to understand, are they implying that Saku has this, or are they implying that Saku's the one who gets rid of people that have this? I'm kind of leaning more towards the latter now that they're mentioning it. I thought they were first implying that she had it, and that's why she's been killing people, but maybe she's the one who's supposed to get rid of the people who have it. However, he denied that reasonable notion. His eyes didn't waver until the end. The man who was once my childhood friend shut his heart to me. But then I lost my words, for I noticed the pure grief deep in his heart. It was a question he could have evaded by simply looking away, but he still faced me, showing an iron will.
納得してくれたかい？
よくわかった。
I accepted his answer even though my unfulfilled expectations bothered me. So many things had changed over the past 7 years, but I couldn't even be glad that this man who used to be my childhood friend hadn't changed at all. Shinri Narita knew that his theory regarding how the Academy dealt with the absurd danger presented by HMIs was correct. Kurofune Mikudo and Tokino Yomase had built a cruel, inhumane system, yet I couldn't find fault in any single aspect of it. I'd once compared HMIs to bombs, if only I knew. There was no comparison. We were bombs, and this was our most apt description. The power of death lied dormant within all of us, like a ticking time bomb, waiting silently until it came to explode and wreak havoc. Onslaught Syndrome had the power to remove our very humanity from us. If even a single person blew up, it would spread like wildfire and infect countless others. What was the percent chance of our detonation? 5? Or was it less than 1? No, it didn't matter. There was something more important to consider.
しんちゃん、君はサクがオンスロート症を発症したと考えているのかい?
Oh, okay. So maybe they are implying. I keep going back and forth. I'm so confused. I just can't tell what they're trying to imply.
疑っている。
Okay. So I was right in the first place and I started doubting myself. The abnormality in her actions over the past few years, a power unmatched by any HMI she'd killed, it all felt far too warped.
それは考えにくい。ここの資料によれば、検査の数値上、彼女はずっと非常に安定していた。
Tagi was right. If the cause was Onslaught Syndrome, then she'd had it for years, and it was hard to imagine that Tokino Yomase who had overlooked Saku's abnormality for that long. However, I saw Saku act unlike herself with my own eyes. That wasn't mere malice or bloodlust, it was something that seemed to warp or wrap around my bones, something completely different. Or perhaps Shinri Narita simply hoped that Saku Otonashi had Onslaught Syndrome. If that was the case, our only option was to lament her fate. I merely had to hate what she'd become, the root cause of the change in her, and believe that Saku Otonashi I knew was real, not a front and a mad woman. However,
仮に言った。サクがオンスロート症を発症していた場合、治療する手段はあるのかね?
ないね。少なくとも僕はそう聞いている。
yeah, I think it's kind of messed up if, like, okay, we're assuming that Saku is going around killing HMIs that are displaying this, right? I feel like that would be such a messed up way. Like, this academy has good ideals, right? But the way they go about it is so terrible. It's, like, so inhumane, right? Like, they're experimenting on people. I think there's a lot more we don't know. I'm gonna just say that. But going around killing people, like, just because they're displaying that and you don't know how to deal with it is pretty inhumane. I wouldn't say this academy is too noble for that. I think the ideals are fine. I think their goals are fine, but the way they go about it is wrong. But I don't know, maybe I just need to, like, shut up. Maybe I just need to keep reading, because, like, I keep going back and forth. I'm like, does Saku have Onslaught Syndrome? Is that what they're trying to imply? Or are they saying she's the one killing people who have it? I don't know. They keep going back and forth and making me doubt my words. I glimpsed at the back of the person staring at the corner of the room and saw no change. If she knew a way to save Saku, she would have chimed in immediately. The Takazakis clearly did not have a way to undo devil descent.
それでどうする?
I had to decide. The longer I hesitated, the more blood would flow. If I waited, her soul would carry yet more sin.
止める。
音無し作はクラウンの筆頭、スクール最強の HMI だ。万に一つ、彼女に勝てる目があるとすれば、同じクラウンの赤人玉緒だけだろう。
I don't know. We kind of beat her in that choreography lesson, just a little bit. Tamao Akahito? Etola grade HMIs weren't the only ones with powerful halos. Was Saku Otonashi so powerful that only Tamao stood a chance in a fight with her?
それがどうしたというのか。
No matter how hard the task, Shinri Narita had to step up to the plate. I had to end it with my own two hands.
学園に報告すれば、理事長は最善の対策を取る。
だから黙って任せろというのかね。
No, we're not gonna do that. We promised Eru we were gonna save Saku, not freaking Kurofune, okay?
そうだ。
甚だ身勝手ながらそれはできかねる。お前にも決着がつくまでは他言無用で願おう。
サクがオンスロートなら人手は及ばない。 一人で挑んだところで勝ち目はないぞ。死にに行くのか。
エルと約束した。音無し策を救うと。
Exactly. Taigi, you can help out if you want, or you can keep doubting me. If Kurofune found out about it, he would do everything in his power to purge her. He would claim victory even if it cost him thousands of lives. And that was the correct decision. When facing something inhuman and devilish, you had to possess an iron will that didn't fear having to make sacrifices. However, sacrifices would only further harm Saku Otonashi. Excuse me. Each and every drop of blood spilled would sully her soul with sin. I promised to save her, which is why I couldn't allow that, no matter the cost.
約束は守らなければな。命を懸ける理由としてはお釣りが来る。
無茶だ。
無茶との付き合い方なら知っていると思う。
Shinri Narita planned to do battle, but not on behalf of the dead individuals he didn't know or any future victims. I simply wished to save Saku Otonashi's soul. Indeed, such selfish motivation truly fit an Avenger.
まったく。言い出したら聞かないね。
そういう性分なのでね。
それで、いつ？
すぐにでも。時間が経てば無用の犠牲も増える。
Dang, are we gonna see a fight between Narita and Saku? Gosh. Like I said, for this being Eru's route, this is insane how much like Saku information we're getting. I turned around and headed to the exit.
わかった。僕も行こう。
I hate to say it though, we probably need Eru's help too. I think Eru is probably gonna be the person who ends up reaching her the most. More than Narita, just because I don't think she has that relationship built up with Narita yet. Those unexpected words made me freeze. Yeah, we definitely need Taigi too. Like, if we're fighting someone who's really that powerful, we're gonna need everybody. The surprise made me turn around, and when I did, I saw him casually shrug as though he had no other choice.
これは珍しい。しんちゃんの驚いた顔を見るのも久しぶりだ。
無駄死には一人で十分ではないのかね。
What do you mean? No one's gonna die. It's not that type of game. No one ever dies in this. Saku Otonashi reigned at the top of the academy, acting as a symbol of fear to all HMIs. The power that had reaped dozens of HMI lives was, as Taigi himself said, something truly extraordinary.
死にに行くつもりだったのかな。
Logically, I had no chance of victory.
私はいついかなる時も勝つつもりだ。
これだから自信過剰は困りものだね。
Taigi shrugged once again. Usually he looked like a shadow being dragged along or someone tired of life, but there was none at the moment.
一人よりは二人の方がいくらかはマシだろう。まあ万に一つが二つになる程度かもしれないが。
万に二つか。
Two individuals planned to challenge the strongest HMI at the academy. We've literally done it before though, like, why are we so worried? I don't know, maybe she's actually a lot stronger than I think she is. I just think Narita's pretty strong. Like, there's no one he's fought so far that he couldn't really beat. I know, like, the SSDs, of course, but... yeah, actually, I don't know. He couldn't even beat the SSDs really by himself. So, I don't know. But then again, most of the time, they usually had a bunch of, like, stuff pre-planned. They're, like, hiding crossbows in, like, the woods and stuff. So that's kind of unfair, but... Taigi Mikado and Shinri Narita's paths had diverged a long time ago, and any chance of them rejoining had disappeared along with it. Thus, this was a momentary dream. We merely planned to walk a few steps next to each other.
なるほど。それならば負ける気はしないな。
Say, we don't even know what Taigi's Halo does, either. Like in the days of old, I stood in front and marched off towards our shared goal. Are we just ignoring Eru right now? This is her route, by the way, Narita. Can you give her some more love and appreciation? Like, obviously, I don't think she wants to go and fight Saku, but can you at least, like, be like, hey, we're gonna go, you know, deal with Saku. I understand this is hard for you. You know, give her a little bit of comfort, at least. We no longer had a need for words. Taigi walked with me as though it was natural. I planned to leave Eru behind since I didn't want her involved in something that was sure to bring her great pain. Yeah, but you just thought that and then did nothing. I hope that was her slapping you, by the way. I failed to comprehend what had happened. Oh. Oh, I thought that was a slap. That's a gunshot. My eyes saw a red flower bloom. A fatal gunshot zoomed into the ceiling and vanished. What the frick just happened? Tuggy covered his abdomen with his right hand. His palm slowly turned red as though doused in paint. There was a black hole in his clothing that unnerved me. Rory?
Tuggy!
Oh gosh. There's about to be another big plot twist. Taigi collapsed to the ground like a broken scarecrow after he uttered that last word. The fresh blood flowing out of his stomach spread on the floor. What the frick?
結局こうなっちゃいましたね。サクを敵として扱うのはなしなんです。
Bruh. Eru, what the frick? My voice sounded hoarse. Eru held a handgun aiming it directly to me, but where had she hidden it?
この銃のことなら成田が見逃したんじゃないですので自信なくさなくていいです。そこのロッカーにあった時野先生の超遺品です。趣味人ですよね、時野先生。
Dang, so you're freaking gonna go against me, huh? I'm literally trying to save Saku like you told me to, you frick. A single bullet from the handgun in Eru's hand had tore open a hole in Taigi, and she'd aimed it directly at me from a distance of only 3 meters. However, I was more surprised that I hadn't noticed any signs of her actions until moments ago. Has to do with her halo. It wasn't simply that I couldn't sense her presence either. She had been at the edge of my vision the whole time.
はい、なんでしょう。
She spoke to me with the same tone she used when she laughed in our classroom. Oddly enough, the gun seemed like a perfect fit in her hands.
最初に私に近づいたのはサクの命令か。
そうです。
サクを救ってくれと言ったの。そうです。
こういう展開になったのは
Oh my-
予想外でしたけど。
Oh my gosh, this has all been Saku's plan. What the frick?
サクは私の正体を探ろうとしたのか。
だと思います。
Oh my mind is so blown. This route has gone so differently than I thought it would. Like I was like, oh wow, this route's like been kind of slow, you know, since the start. They've been giving me like a few like gems here and there, right? But oh my gosh, it's all been leading up to this.
思う
近づくこと、分かったことは知らせること。サクの命令はそれだけでしたので。前にも言った通り、自分はただのものです。所有者の意図は問題ではありません。与えられた役割を果たすだけです。
心はないと。
そうです。高崎エルは役を演じて動作しているに過ぎません。笑顔の形をしてるから楽しいんだろうと解釈するのは見ている方の自由です。
I mean, this shouldn't be news to me, but it is.
錯覚なんですけどね。
If a doll seemed no different from a human, did it truly have a soul, or was it merely an imitation? Wait. So, remember in the common route when she was following us for a bit and trying to find out our weakness? Has this been going on since even back then? Like, how long has she been trying to figure us out? And, like, trying to report things back to Saku? Like, we gotta go back a little bit. Like, oh my gosh. So, if Saku's been like this for years, then ever since we've been at the academy, Eru's probably been trying to figure out more about us. And maybe she's just been changing her way of doing it. Just to not be too suspicious, right? Oh my gosh. I'm like, sorry, I just had that revelation. Like, this has probably been going on for longer than we think, right? Machines had intelligence, but not emotion. A human heart wasn't essential, since that introduced the possibility of more mistakes when all they had to do was execute their functions. That was why they weren't equipped with anything like it. Machines had no fear and worked without worrying about their inevitable destruction. Oh, that was certainly quite the mystery.
策を脅かすものは排除します。それが高崎最後の道具、エルの意味です。
The self-proclaimed tool Eru spoke without emotion, as if that was just another one of her functions. I recalled the sight of Eru when she realized Saku was safe. However, I quickly discarded those illusory shards and sealed them away. I decided to save the question of whether Eru was real or not for later. Regardless of what the girl pointing a gun at me was, I first had to reject the conclusion where I got shot. Shinri Narita had to save Saku, both for Saku's sake and Eru's. I always kept the promises I made no matter what. That was an aspect of Shinri Narita I could never part with. The gun was a mere 3 meters away, and it was close, but Eru was no master gunslinger. Avoiding the bullet and closing the distance was child's play to me. I only needed a second to close the gap, take her gun, and bind her. And so I would. The moment I dashed to her, fully intent on knocking her out. Yeah, you forgot about her halo, though. I did everything in my power to bring Shinri Narita to a stop. Running up and disarming her was simply out of the question. After all, a precious family member I wanted to save more than anyone else had appeared before my very eyes. She was the one Shinsui Mikado had completely failed to save. Please, Narita, for me, do this for me. I want you to figure out what her halo is. Like, I need to know. Like, I'm so confused. What had I almost done? Did I truly intend to stun my little sister who was more precious to me than my very life? What? I'm trying to pinpoint. Can she act like she's somebody else? Like, is she imposing on our mind that she is our little sister? I'm so lost. So lost. What a foolish and terrifying decision. A sense of relief washed over me because I hadn't harmed her. However, the next moment, Eru silently pulled the trigger. My abdomen burned as pain spread through it. I fell to my knees, blood rushed through my fingers as I covered the gunshot wound. The pain granted me a moment of clarity. I understood that the person before me wasn't the innocent little girl who had been mercilessly killed. That girl was long dead. I knew that much, and yet, my will seemed to melt. The urge to give in to my feelings of love overpowered and overwrote my reason. I'm sorry, I have to laugh. This is a little bit, breaking the fourth wall, but I'm excited. Okay. What's the reveal? Okay. A halo that assimilates with the love of others. So, is your halo, like... Trying to understand that. Is it trying to, like, boost the power of my love for my sister? And it's, like, overwhelming me? So, like, every time, like, I'm looking at you and you're using your halo, right? I'm, like, seeing my sister? I did hear her voice, and it produced a stunning revelation. She assimilated with the love of others. Though everyone had a different shape to their love, there was no one who didn't have it. Love for their significant others, family, beliefs, or perhaps even themselves. Eru Takazaki melted herself into the very concept of love as perceived by others. Love controlled people and made them powerless. Not a single person could resist Eru once she combined with their love against their will. Love was a natural part of all humans, and it was impossible to perceive something within yourself as an enemy. No sane person would have even considered it. Even if you had the power to destroy the world, it wouldn't work if you didn't contemplate using it. 5 centuries of the Takazaki family's research had culminated in that invincible power. I finally understood everything. Eru's lack of personality didn't come about because it made her a more convenient tool. The Takizaki's halo assimilated with the concept others had. If their sense of self or personality was too strong, they could probably resist it. That was why they were even turned into tools.
サクの敵は自分の敵です。排除しなければならないのです。
Okay, so the reason why the Takazaki family suppresses their emotions is because their halo is all about assimilating themselves with other people's emotions. Am I getting that? Am I kind of close on that? So like the more she can control her own self, the more she can focus on assimilating with somebody else's feelings. And that gives her a tool to use over them, right? That gives her an advantage.
なるほど。愛に同化しているから、その姿は最愛の対象として認識される。
Interesting.
クーリの姿が見えるわけだな。
Gosh, I love every time I learn about some of these quirks, because some of them are like pretty simple and straightforward, like Tamao's, right? But they have like a little bit of like a twist on them, right? Like when we found out that she could like use her power on somebody else and make them like go faster and things like that, to the point where like throws off their inner balance. Interesting. Like all the halos in this game are really cool. Like that's why I love learning about them, and like I kind of respect the fact that they hide them so much. It makes it like so much more interesting once I actually find out what it is. Like this is cool. Like this isn't like, I think of like My Hero Academia. Like My Hero Academia has like really like simple, straightforward quirks most of the time, but I love when they do stuff like this where it's like completely out of, you know, left field. Like I would have never guessed this. Like I was really trying to understand. Like at first I thought she had a quirk that could like hide her presence. And then I thought like maybe she could implant something into your mind. Like that's kind of where I was going after that. But assimilating with your love. Interesting. Like
まだ喋れますか。びっくりです、成田。
I was surprised myself. Eru's power easily consumed people no matter how hard they clenched their teeth and resisted. I myself had to do everything in my power to keep it together, but that only lasted a few seconds. The source of Eru's halo was the strongest love the target had. In a way, she was tearing Shinra and Narita apart with my own power. I understood that, but I had no way to fight it.
サクを放っておけば、いずれエルは殺されるぞ。
But she doesn't care about that.
自分、道具だと言ってるんですよ。いらなくなったら捨てられるのは当然です。
Suddenly, sonorous words resounded through the cold room.
Say, and maidens call it love in idleness. Type Midsummer Night's Dream 8. Run.
Ah, frick. This isn't good. The extent of her power suddenly grew. Eru inhumanly, slowly, yet precisely aimed at my forehead. The moment I fixed my eyes on the muzzle, I saw Rory holding the gun. The stream of love was far too sweet. It quickly enveloped and sealed away my sharpened will. It felt as though I was falling in love for the very first time all over again. My thoughts and even my vision turned hazy.
さようなら、お兄様。
Hey, you don't get to say that, you frick. Eru's fingers started to pull the trigger. I knew that she'd fire the gun soon, but Rory told me to remain in place. She'd aimed directly at my forehead. A single shot was more than enough to end my life. However, my sister wanted me to sit there and take it. My mind screamed, trying to force me into action, but it lost all power when faced with my sister's voice. Despite the fact that I knew exactly what was going on, the weight of love overwhelmed me. My hands went limp and I gave up on running. A red fluid leaked out of my abdomen and dripped onto the floor. My sister planned to end my life. That meant Shinra and Narita's quest for vengeance had finally come to an end.
さようなら、成田。
No, Rory had died. Who's Narita? We're not Narita. We're Shunsui, Mikado. And we have to fulfill our quest for vengeance. She died that night 7 years ago, along with all the other Mikados. That was the whole reason Shinri Narita existed. I survived in order to fulfill a single promise, my solemn oath, an oath of vengeance. Rory had long since perished, and so I refused to let it end there. Yes, Narita, let's go. Yes, he's using his quirk. Let's freaking go. Oh, I said quirk, his halo. I'm sorry. I keep wanting to call it a quirk. The impossible phenomenon shocked Eru for a moment, granting me a split second to act. As far as I could tell, no human had it in them to resist Eru Takazaki's halo. Strength and speed did not matter when faced with Eru's power, which nullified the very will to resist. That was why she couldn't have missed. The bullet should have pierced Shirin Narita's forehead. However, the supposedly fatal shot sailed by harmlessly, and by the time Eru had opened her eyes, it was already over. I covered her carotid artery with my finger, preventing the flow of blood to her brain. Eru lost consciousness and collapsed on the spot. I almost fainted as well, which was why I used the breathing of Geb to harmonize my body and mind in order to keep standing. That was how drained I was. Eru had been a far more terrifying enemy than any other I'd faced. I hadn't even felt that cornered when 4 armies surrounded me in a South American jungle. Is Taigi gonna die? Is he gonna die? I took a step towards the device on the wall in hopes of calling a doctor. Unfortunately, my consciousness faded at that very moment. Gosh, what the heck is going on in this route, though? Like, it's going in such a different direction than I thought. Slowly opened my eyes, but my vision remained hazy for quite a while. All I remember was that when I tried to walk, but then passed out. I probably had blood loss to blame for that little issue. Little issue, he says. Hey, it's our room. As my vision cleared, I quickly realized I was in my dorm room. What the frick, did you save me? The silhouette blocking the light from the ceiling was Eru. After a few moments, I managed to make out her expression. I'd wonder what face she was making, but it turned out that she looked as composed as ever. Consider, huh? The Eru from before wouldn't have even thought about it. She hadn't seemed to feel guilty about shooting me, which was good. With Eru, that was optimal. I tried to speak and my throat worked properly, but my pain increased in proportion to my regained senses. What a mixed blessing. It hurt, but my body had been given first aid. Disinfection and stopping the bleeding seemed more than enough to patch me up. This is Narita's bizarre adventure. As the full brunt of the pain hit me, all my senses revived. I tried moving my finger and managed to do so easily enough. Then I pushed my arm against the bed and raised my upper body to assess the damage. The wound wasn't shallow. I'd received a blood transfusion, yes, but I more than likely couldn't move. I needed at least 6 hours of rest. Oddly specific number. Eru gazed at her chest and placed her hand over it before looking up again and tilting her head. Eru took my hand and drew closer to me. I'm so lost, though. Why is she suddenly saying this to us after trying to kill us? What if this was all a plot twist? She was trying to test to see if we could get past her halo, because that's the kind of strength you would need to save Saku. Is that what we're gonna? Is that what it's gonna be? Machines couldn't select illogical options because they went against their very nature.
わざわざバカな選択肢を選ぶってことですか？
Yeah, sometimes, for sure.
それだけがあらゆる必然と矛盾を振り切って本物の奇跡に手をかける唯一の手段だ。
いい声で何かっこつけてるんですか？それって宝くじは買わないと当たらないからどれだけ確率が低くても買うと言ってるようなものでしょ？
Yeah, my wife does that, and then she'll win like $2, and then she'll play it again, and then lose it all. So she just spends all the dollar bills I have in my wallet.
そうとも言うな。だがエルはそれと同じことをしようとしている。策に従うという自分の在り方を変えてまでゼロに近い可能性にかけようとしている。
そうしないとサクを救えないですから。
Eru had finally decided to move forward on her own. She had decided to pick what she treasured on her own without any orders to guide her. But that was no doubt the hallmark of a heart. She'd acquired a will of her own and real emotions, which she displayed awkwardly like a child riding a bike for the very first time.
今エルが感じているのはきっと悲しみだ。
Yeah, I'm sure you're feeling a lot of things, honestly. I would be too.
よくわかりません自分。今まで悲しかったことなんてないので。
高崎エルにとって音無策は大切な友人だということだよ。
She'd been her owner rather recently, but that no longer applied.
悲しくて泣くってよく言いますけど、どうしてそんな無駄なことをするんでしょう？
涙を流すのは無駄なのかね。
悲しいというのは望まない結果になったということでしょう？それなら結果を変える手段を講じればいいんです。
Sometimes, but you know, we're human. I think sometimes you just need to find a way to cope with it. I mean, I think coping for too long is a bad thing. Like, if you're looking for like alcohol or something to cope with the pain instead of like facing it, then that's a problem, right? But I think for some people, you just need to cry it out. I think that can really help you to feel better about it. You need that physical, emotional release. But, you know, for some other people, maybe they do need to try to change the results. Maybe they feel better by doing some kind of action and not just sitting there and saying, oh, I'm just gonna accept the results. You know, it is what it is.
泣いたところで何も変わらない。そうすることに何の意味もない。全く無駄なのに。
I don't think it's completely useless.
どうして泣くんです？
言われてみればそうだな。
I don't know. Humans do a lot of things that's useless, right?
人間というのはそんな無駄の積み重ねに意味を見出せるものなのだよ。
It's like, why do we prefer fashion over function, if that's the case, right? Like, if you're building a computer, you want like some of the lighting and stuff, right? You want it to look cool and feel like it's personal to your taste, right? But that you don't need cool colored lights to be functional. It's like if it's all black or if it's all red or whatever color, it doesn't really change the function of it. You would rather have your computer be more powerful than just look pretty, right? But it's like that's just how we are as humans. We like things that look nice and that appeal to us as individuals because we're all different.
自分はもともと道具です。ただの器。機能以外には何も搭載されていません。だから自分の全部はサクからもらいました。今ここにこうしていることも、成田と話をしてることも。
I get what you're saying, Eru. You're like saying who you are is because of Saku, whether that's for good or bad. Like the reason you're here right now and having these more positive experiences is because of Saku. Even though you could probably have these in a much better situation than trying to kill us, you know?
サクと出会ったのは君にとって幸せだったかね。
以前も同じ質問をしましたよね。
Yeah, but now you're being a little bit more honest with yourself. You're being a little bit more human and looking at it from Eru's perspective, not a tool's perspective.
あの時の君は道具が幸せを思ったりするかと問い返した。
やっぱりよくわかりません。でもエルはこの今の自分をなくしたくありません。スクールにいた自分、クラウンの一員だったエルは価値あるものだったと思います。別の持ち主のエルではなくサクのエルだったことを誇りに思います。
人間はそれを幸福と呼んでいるよ。
Eru always seemed to be shrouded in mist, but she looked extremely clear in that moment.
サクを救ってくれと言ったな。
はい。
エルとの約束はすでになされている。私は必ずサクを救う。
ありがとう。
She nodded as she usually did, knowing that it was her first heartfelt request since getting a heart made a question float to the top of my mind.
本当にいいのか？オンスロート症への治療法はないのだよ。
I mean, that's just what everyone's saying. That doesn't have to be true. I mean, just because we don't have a cure for cancer right now doesn't mean it's incurable.
サクが自分の意思で決めたのであれば、それがどんな行いでもエルは黙って従いました。でもこれは違います。サクは誰よりもスクールを愛していました。この場所を守ろうとしていました。
That's a pretty common theme among all the crowns, at least from what I've learned in my experience.
だから高崎エルは最後までサクの意志を、誇りを守ります。
She looked right at me with a resolute gaze. She decided to fight the most important person in the world to her. That's kind of a foolishness. That kind of foolishness felt truly human.
承知した。必ず最後まで約束を果たそう。
I decided not to hesitate or lament our fate anymore. I knew what I had to do.
ところで、サクはここにはいないのかね？
はい。自分たちが戻った時にはもう姿を消していました。
そうか。
What state was Saku in? Had her mind finally succumbed to the disease? Or perhaps she had always been wearing a mask? Had a monster always lurked behind that gentle smile? If that was the case, then was the friend Eru saw in Saku a mask as well? I didn't know the answer to any of those questions. Neither I nor Eru had the means to understand Saku. But I did know that I had accepted Eru's request, and also I wanted to save Saku Otonashi. In fact, I wanted to rush to her rescue straight away, but we were dealing with Saku, which meant I needed to recover and form a proper plan. Waiting was a difficult battle in its own right.
それでは少し休ませてもらおう。
はい。
I decided to silently gather my strength to wait until dawn in order to settle things once and for all. I quickly lowered myself down onto my bed to get as much rest as possible, but Eru instantly huddled up to me. I could only assume that she either wanted to sleep side by side or nurse me.
休ませてくれないのかね？
自分愛の化身なので十分すげえですよ。
それはなんとも。
Huh. Interesting. So, she can assimilate love that's not your strongest, like, powerful... I guess the thing you love the most, right? Could she assimilate other things? So, like, let's say if we were, like, falling in love with her, could she assimilate that and strengthen it? Because that would explain why she was able to do the other thing she was and made us, like, feel so different, you know? Like, we were, like, feeling these more powerful emotions that were very unlike us.
自分に今までまともな意志があったのかよくわかりません。でも成田といると暖かくなる。そういうのなんて言うんでしょうか。
心 感情、気持ち、いろいろな言い方がある。
今こうしているのも同じ気持ちです。
本物が正しくて偽物が間違っているとは限らない。少なくともエルはたとえ偽物だとしても本物以上に綺麗だ。
ベッドでいいっぽいセリフ言う男はこれっぽっちも信用しちゃいけないとハウツー本にありました。
Yeah, you're probably right to think that way.
エルもそう思うかね。
Like always, she tilted her head in thought.
わかりません。ハヤシライスとハッシュドビーフ、どっちがどっちかくらいよくわからないものです。
Her words made me picture two brown plates. Both had beef and vegetables boiled in tomato and brown sauce, and yes, it was hard to tell the difference.
一つ言えるのは、今は成田とこうしていたいと思っているのです。
前と同じように。
同じなんですが、違います。
In that moment, I realized something. The affection I began to feel for her was probably due to her halo. It was only natural to feel immense joy when being with the one you loved the most. Even mere chats brought euphoria. Eru Takazaki had defined herself as a tool and knew not of heart, yet she had the power to move the heart like none other. It was different than last time, but I still felt immense pleasure. There was no longer any need for the halo. Right now, Eru herself was sharing Narita's love.
成田、何考えてますか？他のこと考えるのあんま推奨しませんけど。
ああ、関係なくもない。エルがなぜこれほど愛しく感じるのかという単純な問題についてだ。いや、答えなどない。ないのがいい。愛に理由を問うのはきっと無粋なことだよ。
簡単で難しいですね、心って。
I caressed her hair. Doing so brought back the smell of shampoo, filling the air with a pleasant scent.
私が平坦な乙女にこれほど好意を持つことになろうとは、人生とはわからないものだ。
やはり変態ですね、成田は。感心します。変態の星です。成田ザ・ライジングスターです。
I know, isn't it nice to see this character progression from Narita going from just being a standard pervert who likes big boobs to someone who can appreciate boobs of all sizes? Like, look at this character growth. It's crazy, right?
ところで、体調はどうですか？割と良くなったと思いますが。
ああ、そうだな。どういうわけかさっきまでよりも随分いい。
エルのハローのおかげです。愛は無力にすることもありますが、力も与えてくれるのです。
That is true. That is
今
very true.
は自分の体力を成田に分け与えたんですね。愛少女エルルン、超すごい。
それはなんというか、まさにロマンチックだね。
That's pretty ironic. The person who probably has like the least amount of emotions is also the one like that can help us love the most. Interesting. Had she truly shared her stamina with me? I was tired, but I felt energy welling up deep inside me. The girl that had been engaging in conversation mere seconds ago was now sleeping peacefully.
眠ったか。はあ、なんともマイペースだね。まったく君らしい。
Her sleeping face made her appear defenseless, and somehow Eru looked even younger than she usually appeared.
ありがとう、エル。
I embraced her and expressed my gratitude. Shinui Narita had already regained some degree of strength. With only a few more hours of rest, I would be at full fighting capability. Thus I would sleep, and then once I woke from my slumber, I would settle things once and for all. I involuntarily woke up before dawn. Through the window, I saw breathtaking stars shining amidst the deep black backdrop of the sky. The moon illuminated the entire world. Its cold silver light covered the ancient forests and buildings with a pale glow. The night was so silent and still it made a chill run down my spine, and I looked at the academy's grounds through the glass pane. It appeared completely dead, with us as the sole survivors. Eru was sleeping by my side, and I shook her awake.
朝ですか?
I didn't hear any suspicious sounds or see any shadows in my peripheral vision. However, I almost believed I'd been caught in an invisible spider web. My basic senses didn't notice anything off, but I felt restless, which made my hair stand on end. Shinari Narita knew the feeling well. I recognized it because I'd escaped the hands of the Reaper 7 years ago. That was the stench of death. It was a smell of impending doom that I knew all too well. I tugged on Eru's hand as I dashed through the empty night. My wound still hurt, but thanks to Eru, I had the stamina I needed. I sharpened my senses. The eerie feeling that washed over me grew stronger. Where had it come from? I entered the hallway of the 3rd floor and stopped dead.
こっちなんですか?
あの廊下の向こうは確か
理事長室ですね.
I smelled death beyond the door. A gruesome sight welcomed us as I once opened the door.
平気です.
I assumed that was something I shouldn't show her, but she seemed utterly unfazed. Unobtrusive furnishing, a picture of an unfulfilled dream, a luxurious carpet. The room appeared exactly the same as when I visited the prior day, except blood. 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 It felt like I was looking at a snippet of hell. Fresh blood spread around like paint, colored the ceiling, floors, and walls. And right there, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, was Mikado Kurofune. Blood flowed out of his throat. His posture made him look like an abandoned toy. I didn't need to inspect his body to know he'd perished. And next to him I saw the maid who previously acted as his messenger. Something felt off. He was prone but face up. His face was backward. He'd obviously been killed. A human's head wasn't meant to rotate 180 degrees. Next to them was another bloodied person, Taigi.
まだ生きてます. 傷は浅いみたいです.
I ran up to his body. I had to be careful not to move him more than necessary. The wound Eru had made must have opened, since there was blood on his uniform.
大義、一体何があった？
黒船、父をサクが殺した。
Taigi tried to speak as he held his wound, his face warping in pain.
サクが
The worst case scenario had happened. If Saku was the one responsible for all this, then she actually did have onslaught syndrome.
嫌な予感がして、僕が来たらすでに。
Not to take away from the moment too much, but I remember Taigi was the one who killed Kurofune in Tamao's route. So it's very interesting that he's like mourning the loss of his father. I mean, he could still mourn him then too, but I'm really curious why he did that. His voice was akin to a falling tear. He seemed to be in pain so great that I expected him to vomit out his lungs, so I knew it wasn't just because of his wounds. Saku, the person he wanted to believe in until the bitter end, had killed his father.
サクはどこへ？
外へ。君たちと入れ替わりに。
まだどこか近くにいるということですね。
Eru glared at the door Saku had just left through. Her side profile reminded me of a detailed doll. Like usual, she appeared far from serious. But that was probably a good thing.
急ぐぞ、エル。
はい。
すまないが、手当てはせずに行く。助けが来るまでじっとしていろ。
I had to chase Saku. I called for help through the management info layer. It said they would arrive soon.
どうして彼女は。
I had no proper answers to the pained mutter that left his mouth through ragged breaths. When I turned around, my eyes stopped at Kurofune.
無様を晒したものだな。
Was that truly the conclusion? Had Shin Narita's 7 long years of life led to such a meager end?
無様というにも程がある。人の心さえ捨てて果たそうとした誓いの幕引きが、これとは。なんという滑稽。こんなものは喜劇としても三流だ。
I don't feel like that's the first time he's said it's a third-rate comedy.
成田。
すまない。急ぐ。
I ran, following Saku's presence. Not yet. It was not yet time to fall to my knees. I had to keep moving forward. Shinori Narita still had something he had to do. I'd promised Eru Takazaki that I would save Saku Otonashi, and a promise had to be kept no matter the cost. With only that in mind, I continued running. However, I stopped on the stairs leading to the second floor because I felt something hiding nearby. Shishikai, what the frick are you doing here? It was Sento Shishikai, and as he stood there at the edge of the dark school building, he appeared to be holding in laughter.
Shishikai 教諭、Saku を見なかったか。黒船は死んだのか?
His face warped in joy as he found himself unable to hold back his laughter any longer.
Saku を見なかったかと尋ねているのだが。そうかそうか、やっぱりな。身の程はきまないバカは死にやがったか。似合いの因果応報だ。
Dang, that's a crazy look, my guy. Well, we already knew he was a little bit crazy, or evil, or one of them, one or both. He held on to his sides and laughed as if he had just witnessed the pinnacle of comedy. The emergency seemed to have revealed his true colors. I never expected much of him, but he was even more useless than I'd imagined.
他を当たるとしよ
う。はい。
待てよ、少しは落ち着け。黒船があの理事長が死んだのがショックだろ。私がどうしてここにいるのか想像もつかなくて驚きだろう。成田君、頭の悪い君にも分かるように説明してやろう。それはな、お前が内通者だからだろう。獅子会戦闘。とうに分かりきっていることを今さら言わなくてもいい。夜店時野がいなくなり、スクールが手薄になったので隙を伺っていたのだろうが、それこそ三流の証明だ。
Oh, okay. Are they gonna imply that he's the one who caused that building explosion?
どうしてそれを?
I couldn't help but wonder why he seemed so surprised. Had the man truly believed that no one suspected him?
そうだったのですか。
そうだったのだよ。どこの手のものかは私の知ったことではないがね。これまでスクールの敵対勢力に情報を流してたのは彼だ。
Yeah, I'm with Narita. This isn't really much of a surprise for anybody.
今夜の出来事と彼は無関係だよ。この男にとって黒船が死んだのはいわばキャビネットからムーチーといったところか。
サクたちも揃って獅子会の野郎はスカンと言っていました。納得の雑魚っぷりですね。
Oh hey, this is the quote that I was being told would happen. Much of a bit player as you'd expect.
待てまた貴様ら私を雑魚だと?
Yeah, Shishikai, you got nothing going on. And you got weird eyes. They're like really oddly spaced.
黒船や時の女子も当然気づいていたはずだ。泳がされていたのだよ。さすがにその程度の自覚はあると思っていたのだが、これはいよいよ。
What a friggin' chump. I wanted to heave aside due to his ignorance, but even that seemed like an utter waste of
ただ
time.
生き延びただけだが、それでも勝ちは勝ちだ。三流にしては妨害の拾い物。邪魔にならないよう幸運と勝利をかみしめながら引っ込んでいたまえ。
はい、行きましょう。
Wow, what a loser. I mean, I knew Shishikai was like up to something no good and that he wasn't like that great of a guy, but
くそくそ雑魚だと化け物どもがこの私を雑魚呼ばわりだと舐めやがって。
there seemed to be no end to his cursing, which was so intense it nearly melted his tongue. Once Narita and Eru walked away, Sento Shishikai was left alone, and he ran through the hallway, spewing hatred all the while. With Kurofune dead, he had no reason to stay in that den of monsters. He ran down to the first floor using a different staircase than Narita and Eru. He tried to convince himself that it was an act of pride, and it was actually him just trying to avoid the person who read him like a book.
今のうちにせいぜい勝ち誇っていろ。すぐに思い知らせてやる。お前たちみたいな化け物が人様みたいな顔して生きていく場所はこの世界のどこにもないってことをな。
Something felt wrong. Shishikai didn't understand what had happened, but in simple terms, something that wasn't supposed to be there was, and something that was supposed to be there wasn't. The thing that was supposed to be there was a statue. Schools generally had at least one of them in their gardens. However, the chairman of the academy didn't want one, so the avant-garde art that looked like a joining of a spear and rounded gimlet was its replacement. Somehow the over 2-meter tall garden ornament was right next to him. The thing that was that heavy could have only been moved by a crane, so why was it there? Why was it right here? Then it finally hit him. His thoughts caught up to reality. The presence of the thing that wasn't supposed to be there was the reason why that thing that was supposed to be there wasn't. It was all balanced. His entire left half had been crushed into nothing. A searing pain too great to put into words burned in his brain. He opened his mouth to scream, but his destroyed lungs were too empty for that. Instead, only blood escaped his mouth. In an attempt to escape his demise, he flailed his sole arm and moved his one leg like a jester. A true monster stood before him, and it wasn't even looking at him, and instead it merely walked away like a person would after stepping on an ant. Gosh, I was hoping I didn't have to see that freaking image again. Scary. Sento Shishikai died without anyone sparing him a single thought. Well, good. Screw that guy. Night. The academy. An empty hallway. The inside of the place that had been claimed to be the forefront of humanity mere hours ago no longer looked inhabitable. Instead, it was akin to the gate of hell, surrounded by the stench of blood so thick you could touch it, and the awfully dense presence of death. A single breath of the air seemed enough to rot lungs. A single woman strode through the empty hell. It was Saku Otonashi. Like always, her long hair danced in the wind behind her, and she was clad in her usual uniform as well. However, for the very first time within the academy's walls, a suffocating malice emanated off her. It wouldn't be strange for anyone exposed to the invisible, powerful field of her presence to instantly lose their sanity. It was malice so pure that it could have possibly existed naturally, the kind of wickedness that only demons were capable of. Saku elegantly walked through the land of death, not making a single sound. The pride on display made her seem like the queen of the world. The woman was the strongest being, the pinnacle of humanity. None could match her. She knew that well, and thus she didn't panic or rush. She'd finally fulfilled her goal, so anything else was just extra, like sweets after a meal. She went to the east. For what reason? None. If she had to name something, she would have mentioned her boredom. She didn't want to end the fun night. The climax had to be far more exciting. The dorms were located on the east end of the academy. At that hour, the clueless students were most likely waiting for the morning while enjoying their sweet dreams. She laughed. It sounded haughty, adorable, and jovial all at the same time. She'd forgotten that sweet feeling. Her heart danced like that of a child before a nice meal. Step by step, she walked while savoring the joy like a piece of candy in her mouth. The security cameras placed all over the campus didn't concern her at all. for she knew that no one was there to react to the footage. There we go. They were all gone. She had eliminated every last one of them and hadn't even left a trace of her work. There were no humans there, and so she herself had lost her humanity long ago. Eliminating them was as simple as taking candy from a baby. It probably wasn't even a necessary act, but she'd done it for fun. She twisted them, crushed them, minced them, cut them apart, made them cry, scream, and beg for mercy because it had filled her with immense joy. Gosh, this is not the twist I was expecting. Lots of two-sided people in this game. You know, Soriko and apparently Saku now. And maybe even Eru. Eru's got a different side to her, too. I think Tamao is the only person that I really, was who I thought they were, you know? Next, she wished to do the same at the dorm. She planned to start by paying them a casual visit. She would knock on the door 3 times and welcome herself inside. Based on how late it was, everyone had to be resting in their beds already. Thus, she would head to the closest room and tear off the head of the first person she saw. She would refrain from doing that in the other rooms, however. An instant death was no fun, so tearing off an arm seemed best. How many would she have to kill before the others in the dorm noticed? 200? Oh, how repulsive and exciting, with that many worthless dolls. Oh.
ガラクタ製の人形遊び。そんなにあるならきっと朝まで持ってくれるわ。
It was time for a bloody waltz.
さあさあみんな、今夜は私と踊りましょう。夜が明けるまで怯えて、嘆いて、逃れて、暴れて、抗って。最後の命のひとしずくまで使い潰して私の命を楽しませて。
Gosh, what the frick happened to Saku? What the frick? The haughty evil queen suddenly stopped in place. A shadow had peeked out the door to the grand staircase. Oh frick, Tamao, huh? A single silhouette stood before her. It seemed to bar her path, and it didn't hesitate or waver. In her mind, it didn't matter who that was. After all, they were mere playthings, and she planned to use her power to rid the silhouette of life as easily as she would swat a fly. I wonder if that's where Tamao's been, if she's been, trying to figure out what Saku's doing and trying to stop her. She formed a fist and struck the glass window attached to the hallway. It didn't seem like she used a lot of power, but the punch created a 5-meter wide crack, which quickly made the glass shatter. Had she employed some sort of magic? The odd occurrence didn't end there, however, for the glass shards all ignored. No, obeyed gravity and fell towards the silhouette. That was her power. Her halo deceived the world and made it fall. It was akin to a sideways storm of bullets. No other description seemed appropriate. The speeding swarm of shards looked much like a kaleidoscope as it reflected the moonlight. They were blades that blinded people with their beauty, and then tore them to bits as they passed by, and that was exactly what would happen to the silhouette. Or so one would think. Instead of blossoms of blood, the shards merely ripped off bits of black cloth. They were pieces of clothing worn by the silhouette. The silhouette had looked like a shadow at first because it was clad in all black. It evaded the thousands of shards and soon stood before the woman.
楽しそうじゃねえか、サク。
The silhouette was Tamao Akihito. Interesting. Okay.
あらあら、タマオ。あなたなの？
Did she just ara us? The woman chuckled in joy as Tamao sniffed the air.
は、俺だよ。鼻が利くんだよ。育ちが悪いせいでな。ま、俺のことなんざどっちでもいい。やけに楽しそうじゃねえか、サク。祭りに向かうガキみてえだ。そうよ。今夜は何年ぶりかのパーティーだもの。ハイカブリ姫だわ。念願のお城にようやく呼ばれた末の妹の気分なの。エスコートはどうした？ぼっちでパーティーへ行くのかよ。そんなものはいらないわ。私以外はいらないの。そうでしょ？何もかも邪魔なのよ。鬱陶しいったらない。ところでタマオ、こんな深夜に出歩くなんて、あなた
ここの規則には載ってなかったよな。人を殺してはいけませんって。
The woman grinned. Her full lips resembled a crescent moon. Tamao had never seen that expression on her friend's face before. It was so vile that it chilled her to the core, yet it was also vibrant and beautiful like fresh blood.
行く先はどこだ？
寮へよ。決まってるでしょ。
自分のベッドで朝までおとなしくしてるって。
そうね。一番最後にはそうするわ。
そうか。最後か。じゃあピクニックはここで終わりだ。
Tamao took a step forward. She entered the maddening, ghastly atmosphere surrounding the girl with the spirit of an early bird waking up.
こいつは俺の仕事だろう。お前を止めてやるよ、サク。
The woman sounded impressed by her friend's words, but she actually just found them strange.
ごめんなさい。笑ってしまった。あまりにおかしくて。止めると？
どうやってもどう転んでもあるかよ。どう考えたってお前のリア王をどうにかできんのは俺っきゃいねえだろ。じゃあなんとかするしかねえよ。お前を放っといたら土地狂ったパーティー気分で一体何をやらかすかこっちとらお見通しだ。
お見通し？へえ、そうなの？
お前みたいな世間知らずは知らねえだろうがな。世の中にネジの外れた連中なんてそれこそ吐いて捨てるぐらいにはいるんだぜ。同じさ。今のお前はそういうバカどもとそっくりの顔してやがる。人間なんてそこらの草と同じにしか見えてない。ガーデニング気分であっちを刈り取りこっちを刈り取り、イカれた土地狂い。ま、俺が言えた義理じゃねえけどな。おとなしさくにそんな顔は似合わねえよ。だ俺が止めてやる。
Okay, is this the fight we've been waiting for?
できるの？
できてもできなくてもだよ。
I mean, I kind of wanted to see Narita and Saku fight, but I'll take Tamao and Saku. I'm down. The two girls faced each other. Tamao's gaze was akin to a fiery blaze, while Saku looked back at her with cold eyes as she chuckled in joy. The battle began the moment the two sides recognized one another as worthy opponents. Then to Saku, this encounter couldn't even be called a battle. She was the one who reigned at the peak. She was the absolute strongest. All other beings were merely toys crafted for her amusement. They were akin to the insects that children mercilessly killed.
俺がスクールに来たのは別に大した理由じゃなかったんだ。こんなところ好きになる理由はなかった。気に入って俺はろくでなしなんだ。だからろくでなしじゃないお前や空子やエルにはもっとかっこいい生き方してほしかった。
素敵でしょ？今の私。自由でたった一人。誰にも縛られず、誰も必要としない。完全というのよ。
Uh-oh, that's where you're going wrong. As soon as you start saying you're perfect, you know you're gonna get knocked down a few pegs.
化け物って呼ばれるんだよ。
Gosh, this is such a plot twist for her character, though. I would have never saw this coming.
俺の知ってる音なし作なら多分そう言ったよ。どうしてこうなっちまったんだろうな。
偽物だからよ。あなたたち全部偽物。本物は私一人。この世界では本物にしか価値はないのよ。
It's interesting. That's very much a parallel to what Narita's been trying to feel about Eru, because Eru feels like she's kind of fake and kind of like, you know, a robot or a tool, but he's been trying to convince her that she has value, and now she's saying that only the real thing has value. Interesting parallels here. The woman spoke as if she was stating the obvious.
なるほど。
It all seemed to add up. Shocked by the fact that she still hadn't shed a single tear, Tamao nodded.
俺は確かに偽物だ。偽の学生で、偽の友達で。なるほど。そいつは見事に価値がない。
泣き言は終わり？弱者ほどいろいろなものを欲しがる。正しいとか愛してるとか友達とか、強者には本物にはそんなものはいらないの。嬉しいのよ、タマオ。
Thus, their words, spoken as if sung, seemed to form a double helix as they echoed and tangled.
セッ
Oh, frick.
How beauteous mankind is, of brave new world.
The weight of this sad time, we must obey. Speak what we feel, not what we ought to say. The oldest has born most, we that are young. Shall never see so much, nor live so long.
Type the Tempest 4.
Type King Clear 3.
Run!
Alright, let's freaking go. This is the fight we want to see real quick, before Narita's. The school building suddenly shook. There wasn't an earthquake, however, it was far too localized for that. Naturally, I felt the wave of bloodlust from the first floor from such a distance. Taking Eru in my arms, I dashed towards its origin. I found it at the east end of the first floor's hallway, right in front of the door to the grand staircase. There was black dust all around, signs of a battle, surely. It slightly hampered my vision, but beyond it I saw two silhouettes. One of them was Saku, bathed in cold moonlight. The gruesome beauty stood victorious. Next to her feet was Tamao, all bloody on the ground. It was rather evident who had won the battle. The sight made me doubt my eyes. Tamao's halo was a physical area type that enhanced her abilities to inhuman levels. As someone who'd actually fought her, I understood her beastly strength well. That time, she held back because it was merely a duel, while this was a true fight to the death. Tamao had probably faced her for that very reason. She wished to put an end to things herself. Even if Saku Otonashi was the strongest HMI at the academy, she shouldn't have been a match for Tamao in a battle to the death. And yet the result was clear. While Tamao was on death's door, Saku appeared literally unharmed. I would have understood if they fought hard and it appeared close, but that hadn't happened. How powerful was she to have reached such a one-sided conclusion? Saku raised her left hand like the Reaper's scythe. It would fall and rid Tamao of her life, but she was too injured to prevent it.
あなたはよくやったわ、タマオ。偽物にしては。
はいやつだな。まだ終わってねえよ。
その傷ではあなたのハローでも追いつかない。自分で分かってるくせに。
Gosh, this game's so crazy. I like how this is supposed to be about Narita and then him getting revenge and stuff, and then we have so much more important things going on here, like, you know, Kurofune, oh yeah, he's dead, by the way, and Saku is gone crazy and she's trying to kill everybody. Such a plot twist for this game, honestly.
もう立てないでしょ。拳も握れないでしょ。足もまともに動かない。あがいても体を起こして口を聞くだけで精一杯。それでどうするの？
The difference between them was apparent, like that of a tiger and a mouse. Despite essentially licking the floor, Tamao challenged the woman who had her life in the palm of her hand.
教えてやるよ。
She used her torn arm as support and stood up, using her legs, which bent in a strange way. Tamao rose her body, which felt as heavy as lead, even slower than a normal person would crawl.
かってこいよ本物。偽物ってのはな、お仕置きが悪いんだぜ。
まったく可愛らしい。そうよ、そうでなくてはね。赤人玉緒なんだもの。エトワールの一人、クラウンの一角ですものね。この程度でくじけていられないわよね。あなたの両肩にはスクールのお友達全員の命がかかってるんですものね。諦めていられないのよね。もっと声を聞かせてほしいわ。そう、まずは耳から行こう。その次は目で、それから鼻、唇、指、腕、足、順番に順番にもいでいこう。
Gosh, that's pretty gruesome.
あなたはどこまでいけるかしら。泣き叫ばずに我慢できるかな。やっぱり試してみなくてはわからないわよね。玉緒、最後まで私を楽しませてね。
見ろよ。
ええ。
The Reaper's scythe swiftly fell. The prey was unmoving, and the attack was as sharp as any blade of legend. However, the slash had sailed towards Samao's left ear, merely cut through empty air. I slipped by and grabbed Samao with my right arm. Eru remained in my left one the entire time. I'm sorry, I have to laugh a little bit. I'm just imagining him just like carrying them both in his arms, and he's just like running along, you know? He's just like, oh, sorry, were you trying to hit her? My bad. I became one with the wind, but Saku still had noticed me and changed her target, grazing my temple. The sheer power of her knife hand strike was ridiculous. A simple touch from her fingertip would have crushed my skull like a ripe persimmon.
君を抱いて走るのも2度目だな。
と、自分です。無視すんな、かませ犬ヤンキー。
And so I made some distance between us and Saku with Tamao in my arms. Even though it had turned into a 3 against 1 battle, Saku didn't attempt an escape. In fact, it didn't even seem like she saw a need to chase me. Instead, Saku merely looked at me with the noble grace and haughtiness of a hegemon.
どうしたの、成田。こんな時間にエルまで連れて。不純異性交友だなんて、本当に困ったものね。
You know, shut up. That's all I have to say to you. I know what you did. You've done some horrible things. You killed the person I was supposed to kill. Like, hey, what's up with that? She shrugged, looking the same way as she had during our prior meeting. But something about her had warped. Clad in death and an air of blood, Saku Otonashi looked even more enthralling than before, making me believe that even so much as talking to her would rid me of my soul.
恐ろしいな。これが音無し策か。
I let go of the girls and stood in front of them like a shield.
バカ、引っ込んでろ。成田の出る幕じゃ。
Tamao, what the frick? I'm trying to save your life, okay? Tamao seemed to be supported by the last vestiges of her willpower. Merely talking almost made her lose consciousness.
玉緒のことは任せよう。
四天王一番の小物は任されました。
Wow, freaking rip. I focused my attention on the maiden before me. I was facing a being beyond human comprehension. I stood no chance unless I unleashed all of my abilities.
それで、ここまでわざわざ何をしに？
Is Narita gonna explain his halo now?
約束を果たしに来たのだよ。
それはつまり、私の邪魔をするために？
I believe so.
音無し策を救うために。
Her laughter reminded me of a bell as it echoed all around us.
救う？誰を救うつもりなの？成田。出来損ないの偽物がまさか私を救うというの？
I didn't feel like talking much at that point, so I merely asked a simple question.
すべて君のやったことか。
どこからどこまで全てに入るのかよくわからないけど、大体はそうね。
どうしてだね。
そんなことを言われても、人が何かする理由なんてそんなのは決まってるわ。楽しかったからよ。
I do a lot of things I don't find fun on my daily life. She said all that as if it was only obvious, as if she was actually surprised I'd asked the question, and the fact made the hopeless outcome rather clear.
あえて言うなら目障りだったから。例えば花を育てている時にたくさん虫がついていたとしたら、あなただって取ってしまうでしょ。
そうか。
さ
Let's go, baby! I lowered my stance and dashed forward without even waiting until Saku stopped nodding. Dang, you broke the rule of anime. You're not supposed to attack before they're done monologuing. Cutting through the curtain of dust, I closed a whole 5 meters of the distance between us in a single step. I didn't even think he used his halo yet. I could have reached her if I wanted to, but instead I used my second step to bypass her. I took my third step when I got back, kicking off the wall that intersected with the one to Saku's back left. The fourth step went on the ceiling right above her. It was an instantaneous corkscrew attack that seemed to defy gravity. Once upside down, I knocked off the platform above to launch a lightning-fast ambush on Saku, who had completely lost sight of me. None of what I had done used a halo. It was all the work of human ingenuity. With enough skill and spirit, even walls and ceilings were valid footholds. I didn't know what Saku was capable of, but she cornered Tsumao Akihito while remaining unharmed, so I had no choice but to act as quickly as possible. The unreasonable spiral movement I performed was more about shaking off her spirit than vision. I didn't know whether Saku had the greatest offense or defense, but whatever it was, my life would end the moment she used it, and so I relied on the element of surprise, hoping that it would allow me to overwhelm the strongest HMI. Several feints, no sound at all. My attack couldn't even be perceived, and yet... In the end, I pathetically rolled on the ground to create some distance between us, while Saku merely remained in place.
欲しい欲しい。
まったくだ。危うく3度は殺されかけた。
I wrung out those words as the queen smiled broadly in joy.
これが君のハローか。なるほど。玉尾でも届かないわけだ。
Wait, I'm confused. How did you figure it out? She ate my speed. That was the best way to describe it. I attacked 7 times in 3 vastly different ways. However, all my knife hand strikes and kicks lost speed as they draw closer to her. And lost speed was different from merely slowing down. She stopped me midair and reached for me like a lady reaching for an oasis in the desert. I didn't know what she would have done, how she would have done it, but I understood that my life would have ended if she grasped me.
今の奇襲は我ながらこれまでで3種の敵だったのだがね。あれで防がれるのなら意識するしないを問わないオートだろう。しかしどこまで防げるものだろうね。例えば銃弾やミサイルの類だとしたら。
試してみれば。私は構わないわよ。
After looking at her confident face, I guessed the results without even attempting it. Energy was the product of speed and mass. She could reduce all speed to 0 so no attack could harm her. Wait, she can control speed and mass? What? Hold up. So she's frick, what is that called? Is it not a physical manipulation type? It's something like that. I don't think that's what it's called though. Saku could see me, hear me, but she didn't freeze, so it wasn't like she blocked off all light or heat. Did she choose what to let through, or was there set conditions for it?
5つです。
For a moment, I thought I imagined the voice behind me. Forgetting my situation, I questioned it.
自分はサクのキャバリエでしたから知っています。もしサクが以前と同じなら、同時にエミュレートできるハローは最大で5つです。と言いました。
Wait, she's emulating other people's halos? What? That meant Saku Oshinashi had 4 other halos at her disposal. I can see why she's considered the strongest HMI at the academy.
スクールの頂点というだけはある。
Oh, I'm sorry, I read his line. Got a little too excited. But, so wait. She's an HMI who can use 5 other HMIs. That's broken! What the frick? That alone was shocking enough, but Eru didn't stop there.
サクにハローは通用しません。
And she's immune to other? What? That's so broken! What the frick?
通用しないと。
そのままの意味です。サクのリア王にはハローによる干渉ができないのです。系統も威力もグレードも問わず、外部からのいかなるどんな干渉もです。
It reminded me of what she said in the dorm when we last
ここ
met.
で使っていいの？
Could she have been asking if I really wanted to try using my halo on her? Saku Otonashi had a halo that nullified halos. She truly sat at the peak of power within the academy. Defeating her involved breaking through her halos while not using my own. That also explained why Tamao alone stood a chance against her. The Tempest 4 improved all physical abilities. By transforming her halo into physical speed and power, she could reach Saku.
さて、相談はもういいかしら。次の手品があるなら見せてちょうだい。芸が尽きるまでは付き合ってあげよう。その先は。
Okay, so you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Naruto, believe it or not. It reminds me of, like, later in the series, when they have to essentially use taijutsu. Like, they can't use any of their other kinds of jutsu because they're, like, immune to them, right? So you have to, like, increase your physical power instead of using, your more, like, chakra-based stuff. Saku waited fully confident. Of course she did. To her, our desperate struggles were little more than window dressing. The proud girl who once loved the academy and wished to protect it with her life laughed as she played around with people's lives like toys. And the fact that the Saku I knew no longer existed was the saddest part of it all.
光栄の至りだよ、女王陛下。せっかくの慈悲にお応えして、もうしばらくダンスのパートナーを務めよう。
I stuck my right hand forward and assumed a fighting stance. My opponent was an omnipotent hegemon who boasted both the strongest offense and defense. The difference in power between us was rather evident. I stood no chance and had no means to harm her. However, I still refused to fall to my knees. I promised to save Saku no matter what, so I had to keep at it until the end. Suddenly, right before we clashed, a tiny silhouette entered the space between us.
自分がやります。
The moment Saku and Narita prepared to clash, Eru said that and rose to her feet. Eru had carefully placed him out on the floor with just a glance as a goodbye. She faced the strongest HMI at the academy head on. Mao wanted to stop her. Unfortunately, her body refused to listen. She'd obviously overdone it during her fight with Saku, but staying silent was out of the question. Saku and Eru. Eru shot at victory, and a confrontation between the two was literally non-existent. Saku's King Lear 3 negated all direct halo effects, rendering Eru's only method of attack ineffective. It was akin to an ant standing against a tidal wave. There was no question of what was going to happen in a few dozen seconds. Tamao's voice was barely audible, as if she'd used her last bit of strength to speak. As soon as I heard it, I closed in on Eru. If Eru's actions were entirely reckless, I planned to listen to Tamao and stop her no matter
や
what.
ると言っても、何をするつもりだ。
サクとは自分が戦うということです。
I was behind Eru, so I couldn't read her expression. However, I didn't need to see to know that Eru had her sights set on Saku and nothing else.
サクにはハローが通じないと言ったのは君だ。
はい。でも自分ならできるかもしれません。
I might? That illogical decision seemed entirely unlike Eru Takazaki.
そうあれかしと信じるのか、高崎。
自分はエルはサクを救いたい。
Well, I hate to tell you, Eru, it's unlikely that the power of friendship is going to help you here. Eru said that despite believing it to be impossible, she spoke as Saku's friend, not a Takazaki tool.
あなたは私のものじゃないの？そうです。そうでした。でも今はよくわかりません。成田のおかげでわからなくなってしまいました。でも成田にも感謝しています。エルにわかっているのはサクを救いたい、それだけです。わからないわ。何から救うの？こんなに私は上機嫌で自由で気ままなお祭り気分。今夜は朝まで踊り続けるつもりなのよ。わからなくなっていることから救います。私の言うことが聞けないの？せっかく直してあげたのに。とうとう本当に壊れてしまったのね。
Wow, Saku, is one of your freaking halos to be a manipulative. I'll let you all finish that sentence. Saku released an invisible force. It wasn't bloodlust or hostility, she was merely proclaiming her presence, yet it was so overwhelming that I found it hard to keep my eyes open. However, Eru didn't back away, instead she took on the surge of malice, which even I subconsciously avoided head-on. Resisting the wind, Eru took a step toward her friend. I placed my hands on her shoulders to support her. I decided to support her reckless act. Tamao gasped behind me, shocked by my decision. There we go. Now she's looking confident. I have no idea where this is going. I don't know how we're supposed to win. If Eru wished to challenge Saku while fully aware of her powers, she must have had a solid plan. It didn't matter how difficult it would be or at what cost it would come. If Eru believed in it, so did I. Shinri Narita wished to support Eru Takazaki's will until the very end. Oh, she's using another power, huh? But how is this gonna work? What followed was a set of words akin to a sorrowful song. It made its call it. Oh, excuse me.
Love in idleness.
But how are you? I'm so confused. How are you supposed to use this against her? Eru looked at Saku while Saku sneered at Eru.
Midsummer Night's Dream 8. Run!
A field of blood bloomed in the air. Eru released the red liquid out of her mouth, eyes, ears, and nose. It drew red lines as it trickled down. Oh, frick. Well.
おとなしサクのキャバリエだったあなたはよく知っているはずよね。ハローで干渉しようとすれば私は自動でそれを破壊する。サクを救うまでです。今ので死ななかったのは大したものだけど時間の問題というやつよ。
Oh, so she's trying to break through her halo.
忘れたんですか？エルのハローはサクが半分持っていった。半分しかないんだから受けるダメージだって半分ですよ。
Wait, so when Saku takes someone's halo, she's like stealing it?
ハローの制御が全くできない不良品として自分が誰なのかもわからなかったエルをそうしてサクは救ってくれました。
Gosh, this really does have like a very big semblance to Charlotte.
だから今度は
Eru found the fact that she said that rather strange. To face Saku as she had was both reckless and futile. She knew that better than anyone, for she was closer to Saku than anyone else. And by doing so, she had also rejected Eru Takazaki's very existence. Tools that attempted to harm their owners were worthless trash. Saku sneered. What a nightmare. The expression on Saku's face didn't suit her at all. She had to be woken up by a good slap in the face. When she first enrolled, Eru was a defective product that couldn't even control the halo, so even her sense of self was vague. The one who fixed her was Saku. She built her up brick by brick, like a building. Perhaps Saku had done it only to kill time, or maybe she took pity on the tool that didn't even know what it was. But that meant the world to Eru. She was a tool, yet Saku expanded her horizons for the very first time. At that moment, Eru finally understood that she'd felt what people called gratitude all along. Her heart would always be an imitation. Nothing could escape the form they were born with. Eru, as one born as a machine, would always be a fake. But still, there was a warmth in her heart, which was given to her by both Saku and Narita. That alone was enough. Perhaps that smile was little more than an illusion designed to make it seem like the person was having fun, but this momentary joy was precious enough to me that nothing else mattered. That in mind,
ありがとうサク。それに成田。
she internally muttered the words she probably wouldn't have time to say. She planned to spread all the love she had acquired, and fulfill her function with the life she was granted.
良いの成田。今のは耐えられたけど、次はダメ。エルは死んでしまうわよ。
それがどうかしたのかね。
For the first time so far, Saku showed actual surprise.
それでいいの？
いいも悪いもない。高崎エルが自分で決めたのだ。そして私はここで支えていると約束した。何が起こるとしてもだ。そしておとなしさく君を救おう。
Narita forced more strength into the hands holding Eru's shoulders. Eru appreciated that steadfast support. If she had the ability to shed tears, she would have surely done it.
それは無駄よ。
無駄ではありません。エルにはおとなしさくの愛が。
分かったから。一体何だと？
サクの中に以前の愛が残っていると言っているのです。さっきだって成田を逃した。玉緒だってあっさり殺せたはずなのにしなかった。
それは
楽しんでいるからですか。そうかもしれません。でもそうでないかもしれません。エルはそうでないことを信じます。
Eru essentially wished to hack Saku. She planned to access the love that she once had, which had been trapped inside her, and pull it out. The likelihood of success was next to non-existent. Eru herself knew that better than anyone else, that challenging Saku's King Lear 3 was absurd as the story of David and Goliath. But what of it? It wasn't completely impossible, it was worth a shot. Even if the odds were trillions or quadrillions to 1, she would save Saku at the cost of her life. And she would never regret that decision. Eru spat out more blood, but continued regardless. Using a halo and Saku exposed the user to endless retaliation. Only the ones involved truly understood the nature of their battle.
そこにいますか。聞こえていますか。サクはいつもスクールを守ると言っていました。立ってください。今がその時です。
She'd heard that she wouldn't survive the next attempt, but despite that she tried it again and again, bearing it, shedding tears of blood and believing until the very end.
エルがあなたの愛を引き上げてみせます。だからこんな悪夢は終わりにしましょう。さあ起きてください。おとなしさく。
どれだけ呼びかけたところで
届いてください。
そんなものが
届いてください。
何になると？
届いてください。
Saku covered her mouth with her hand, blood leaked out between her fingers.
サク。
Seeing something in Saku's bloodied face, Eru, who felt both mystified and scared, muttered her name. Within the mix of crimson and pale white, we briefly saw the face we knew well. Everyone present understood that she was the one who wished to protect the Academy most. What had she tried to say? Had she tried to call out to the small girl who stuck beside her for so long? Whatever it was, she failed to finish. The hand covering her mouth pressed down so hard it seemed to almost crush her face. The face behind the finger switched between the one we knew and the one we didn't. For a brief moment, the faces even mixed to create a single one, and a crimson flower bloomed. Not even we understood what had happened, even though we'd stared straight at it.
Saku!
A sharp wail resounded. Saku Otonashi released rose-like blood from her entire body and collapsed into the bed of red petals she'd created. Dang. Eru crouched down next to Saku. She took Saku's blood-covered, powerless hands with her usual blank expression on her face. I merely watched, not saying a word. Tamao recovered enough to stand by me, but she, too, remained silent. Saku, shaking hands, combed Eru's hair in the same manner she had always done. Her suddenly colorless lips moved. She tried to say something again and again until finally... Her hand fell and her lips closed. Saku Otonashi didn't speak another word. Eru's eyes started leaking something. It looked like a dam had burst. The droplets reflected silver in the moonlight, and it was something Eru Takazaki had never experienced before. We humans called them tears. Eru's voice went up an octave as she shed more and more tears. Eru cried. She clung to Saku's unmoving hand, refusing to let go, and presented her true self without any pretense. In that moment, Eru discovered a brand new emotion. After a long, long time, her not-so-real heart came to understand the meaning of true sadness. The tears and scattered sobs continued without end. Her lament reached the skies themselves. Eru continued crying as if to shake off the loss and pain. She didn't hold back or show any signs of stopping, and instead wept like a newborn babe. A little over a month had passed since that long night. The incident during which Kurofune Mikado and the other officials died had cast a long shadow over the academy that had lifted as of yet. For one, the lack of lecturers resulted in the cancellation of many lectures. Nearly half of them had become self-study sessions. The incident itself was dealt with behind closed doors, and had proved difficult but possible due to the lack of dead students. Tenkawa Noble Academy continued to exist, though not in the same manner as before. A person no one had ever heard of appeared out of nowhere and quickly cleaned up the academy, then took Kurofune's spot as the chairman. The new chairman issued a gag order to the few students who knew the details, and it ended with most of the academy student body left in the dark.
ああ、怪我なら大丈夫さ。本当は医者からまだ動くなと言われているんだけどね。いつまでも寝ているわけにはいかないよ。
Taigi, what the heck? Why am I starting to like you? I literally said the whole game that I'm not really cared for Taigi that much. And now, like, he's slowly growing on me. I'm slowly respecting him a little bit.
父も時の先生もいなくなってしまった。これだけの騒ぎがあった以上、スクールも今までのように HMI を受け入れていくというのは難しくなるだろう。そのうちここもありきたりのごく普通の学園になってしまうのかもしれない。そうだね。ここがどんな場所でも必要としていた人たちはいた。ここがなくなってしまったら彼らはどこへ行けばいいのかな。ああ、僕はもう少し続けるつもりだ。僕にもずっと昔に誓ったことがある。たとえ道が遠くても最後までやり遂げるよ。
The dazzling sun warmed the world, while the cicadas sang their deafening song. Early summer had passed, and the seasons had entered its true prime. The dazzling sky would eventually turn cloudy as autumn rolled in, paving the way for winter. And so long as the world still turned, spring would arrive once more. Those who had yet lived, time was like a river that flowed swift and sure. Eru walked, pushing a wheelchair. Considering her small frame, this was difficult for her. The wheels creaked every now and then due to the shift in force applied. Both Taigi and Soriko had insisted on helping her, but Eru refused to hand the role over to anyone else. Using her lacking physique, she slowly but steadily pushed the wheelchair and the one sitting on it. Occasionally, the uniformed students gave her strange looks. But those only ever lasted a second. Everyone knew that something had happened that resulted in numerous sacrifices. And so, they figured that the person in the wheelchair had been caught up in the incident and was hurt because of it. That was both right and wrong. While the gag order in place, most of the students would never learn the truth. Eru also planned to never tell anyone about it.
どうです？何か必要なものはありますか？頭に椎茸でも植えましょうか。
She occasionally spoke to the one in the wheelchair, but responses were scarce. Eru leaned in to wipe the handicapped person's sweat with a handkerchief, but she did it with a somewhat sad expression on her face that felt almost out of place. After the incident, Eru started to change. She didn't seem too different on the surface, but her expressions had grown far more vibrant. The feelings that had taken root inside of her were extremely unreliable, and it was clear that it would take years for them to assume their proper form. Still, Eru had changed.
にしても重いですね。車椅子生活で太ったんじゃないですか？ブーブー。
No response. Eru watched her step as she pushed the wheelchair, which resulted in her spotting a familiar pair of feet. Not stopping, she purposely ran them over.
痛い、やめたまえ。
Wow, how rude.
おはようございます。L 式愛情表現です。
Oh, I'm sure.
愛情表現か。そういうことならばいいとしよう。しかし、車椅子が揺れてしまうのではないかね。
おお、それは困りますね。成田のつま先はおぼろ昆布くらいペラペラになっても困りませんが。
Thanks for your consideration.
向こうが透けそうだな。
Even if no one knew the truth of the incident, they knew of Mai and Eru's relationship. Of course they would, since the two greatest weirdos the Academy had to offer were a couple. Oh, okay. Suddenly, the person in the wheelchair spoke up. I replied with the most affable smile I could muster.
Saku.
Saku Otonashi had survived. Though she definitely wasn't well, she destroyed herself using her halo. The wounds cut deep. Damage to her brain and nerves was particularly severe. It was so bad that she couldn't move without a wheelchair.
Saku, 名前は覚えましたか？成田。
正解だ。
The wounds had harmed far more than just her body, however. A few years worth of her memories were wiped, so she no longer knew anything about the Academy or even Halos. She also spaced out a lot, like she had moments ago. Eru pushed her around in the wheelchair, refusing to rely on anyone else. She'd only ever asked for me for help when she had to bring the wheelchair out from the school building to the inner garden. The campus grounds were filled with hot air and bathed in dazzling sunlight. As we roamed around it, a girl with blonde hair that shone in the summer light approached us. Soriko!
今日は調子が良さそうだね、サク。押すの手伝おうか？
I've missed you, Soriko. You were gone like this whole route.
いらないと言ってるでしょ。パンツ逆さ取りして成田の待ち受けに設定しますよ。
That's oddly specific. Kind of weird, but okay.
ごめんなさい。僕、どうしても気になって。
Soriko, considered as ever, walked around Saku and Eru. Saku looked at her with strangely clear eyes.
ごめんなさい。あなたの名前、わからない。僕は空子。桂木空子だよ。できればでいいので、覚えてくれると嬉しい。
Soriko squinted as if bearing a burden. Saku's clouded memories made it hard for her to remember people properly. For some reason, she instantly remembered Eru, then eventually remembered me. The others weren't as fortunate.
それから、俺が赤石と玉緒だ。
Smao joined in on our conversation.
検査も良好だったそうだし。よかったな、サク。
はい。
Until that day, Saku had been kept in the research building, where she went through strict testing. Her life depended on the results. It wouldn't have been surprising if they just disposed of her. The doctors involved with her said that the result was a miracle. Saku Otonashi was completely stable. There was no signs of onslaught or slider syndromes. The reason for that, however, remained unknown. They suspected that the damage to her brain had a secondary effect, but had no proof. If she'd been alive, Tokuno Yomase might have reached a different conclusion.
どうして治ったんだろうな。いや、すごい良かったことなんだけどよ。
I rubbed my chin and thought.
オンスロート化をハローによる侵食と定義するなら、とても簡単な結論が出るだろう。
The testing had shown that Saku Otonashi was no longer an HMI. She'd lost her halo, and it wasn't that she was no longer able to activate it due to mental trauma either. It had vanished without a trace, and no test showed its presence. Halos were a vague possibility in a field yet unexplored. The mysteries surrounding them were many, and minuscule things could change them severely. With an event like that happening, it wasn't strange for it to have vanished. The greatest HMI had been lost. I wouldn't have been surprised if the researchers who discovered that jumped right off the roof due to grief.
HMI で亡くなって、オンスロードでも亡くなった？
After hearing my conjecture, Eru nodded in understanding. It made sense to her.
もっとも奇跡の理由を考えるのは無粋なものだがね。
俺が悪いのか？
そういう成田も時々何か考え込んでるんですけどね。ま、どうせエロスなことばかりでしょうか。
Not all the time, but sure.
まあまあまあ、こんな日に喧嘩しないでね。
Tamao was gritting her teeth, so Soriko had to calm her down. Past the hallway, we arrived at the academy's entrance.
このまま学園にいていいのかね。君は何か別にやることがあるのだろう。
I cautiously whispered that in Tamao's ear, making sure not to be overheard.
いつから気づいてよかった。油断ならねえ。誰にも言うなよ。俺、もうすぐ姿を消すからよ。後腐れなく、綺麗さっぱりいなくなる。
I guess that Tamao had accomplished whatever her goal was.
偽学生の身分ともおさらばってわけだ。
Oops.
偽物は。
ん？
I wanted to say something, but decided against it.
なんでもないとも。
やっぱ、てめえは変なやつだ。
At the gate, we found a middle-aged woman. She was Saku's mother. Her mind and life had stabilized, so Saku had to leave the academy. Sad as it was, the academy was no place for a maiden who lost her halo. Besides, Saku had taken many lives. That was an undeniable truth. I didn't know if the thing we'd encountered that night could be called Saku. The Saku we knew, that Saku from that night, and the Saku in the wheelchair, was one of them fake, or were they all actual parts of her? Unfortunately, I had no way to discover a solid answer. The Etoile Saku and the murderer Saku had vanished, leaving only this Saku. There was blood on her hands. Though she survived, her sin was a grave one. However, Saku didn't remember any of that. There were countless answers to the question of whether she should be found guilty or not. I, Eru, Taigi, Tamao, the four of us who knew the truth talked about it and decided we wouldn't speak a word of it to the girl in question. If there ever came a time when Saku regained her memories of her sins and swore to face them, I planned to do whatever I could to help. However, I also thought it was fine for her to forget everything and begin life anew, even if some didn't agree. Whatever the case, I knew for certain that even if she remembered everything, Saku would never run away. And so she needed to rest in order to stand on her own 2 feet once more.
それじゃあな。達者でやれよ、サク。
はい。
Mao said that somewhat bashfully, then looked away. The response she received lacked any emotion.
さようなら、タク。手紙送るから、またどこかで会えたらいいね。
はい。
Soriko took Saku's hand and shook it over and over. Despite the emotion from Soriko's side, Saku seemed entirely unmoved.
新しい自分で新しい何かを見つけたまえ。
はい。サク。
Eru's eyes seemed slightly wet.
キャラに合わない言動をするところでした。サク、外でも適当にやっていくとよろしかろうです。ベタに登校時間に目を覚まして家を飛び出したりしてください。はい。
Eru had swallowed her feelings and spouted her usual nonsensical words. Saku seemed cold until the very end. Eventually, Eru handed Saku's wheelchair over to her mother, who then gave us a bow and pushed Saku away. Slowly but surely, Saku left the academy for good.
サク。
Unable to hold it in any longer, Eru shouted. She shouted the name of the girl who'd owned her, the name of her closest friend. Tears slowly rolled back down her cheeks.
サク！いつまでも自分はサクのこと忘れませんから、サク！
The middle-aged woman turned around and gave Eru a slight bow. Her expression showed how troubled she was. It seemed to say, Saku is no longer Saku. Eru continued shouting as Saku passed through the gate and vanished beyond the corner. Unable to find the right words to say, I merely placed my hand on her shoulder. Eru and I weren't the only ones there. Tamao, Soriko, and Taigi also watched as Soriko disappeared from sight. She didn't turn around even once.
別れの時は泣いても構わないのだよ。
そんなの嫌です。涙は悲しいから流すものなんでしょ。でもサクは生きているんです。ヘルのことを覚えていなくても、ここにいられなくなっても生きていてくれます。それだけで悲しくはありません。
Even after Saku vanished, Eru continued to watch the gate. She resisted feeling sad about the parting, holding her voice in her throat as she stood tall like Saku once had. I thought I saw tears welling up in her eyes, but that was surely my imagination.
人を人たらしめている心はどこまでも偽物かもしれないが、それがこんなにも素晴らしいものを与えてくれる。不思議だとは思わないかね。エルが機械だとしても、突き詰めれば人間も肉でできた分子機械だ。機械が心を持ってはならないという道理はない。
成田、サクはどうなるんでしょう。
確かにサクはもうサクではないのかもしれない。だがサクで亡くなったことは救いでもあると思う。人だけではないよ。この世界は何もかもが変わっていく。我々はそれを受け入れて生きていかなければならない。
自分もうエルではないのかもしれない。
そうかもしれない。それはおそらく私も同様だ。
Kurofune had died. Shinryu Narita had lost his reason to live, the oath of vengeance he'd sworn so long ago. Only one target remained, but due to all the recent happenings, I'd lost the desire to hunt him down. I wouldn't have hesitated before, instead I would have acted immediately to accomplish my goal. A Shinryu Narita who had lost sight of what he had to do surely wasn't Shinryu Narita. Kurofune was gone, and so was Tokino Yomase. Saku had left, and Tamao would soon follow. What would I do then? No, that was a foolish question. I had to decide that for myself. While thinking of the image of Saku as she left, I wondered where to go. Suddenly, my dulled senses realized the obvious.
エル、
成田、余計な慰めなどは必要ありませんが。
そうではないよ。
The fact that Eru had returned to her usual self brought a smile to my face.
我々は偽物だとサクが言っていたのを覚えているかね。あの夜の魔こそあるべき姿なら。なるほど。HMI は不完全な偽物でしかない。
あれが本物なら自分、本物よりかっこいい偽物でいいです。
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you.
君はどうやって本物と偽物を区別する？
一番最初のものが本物じゃないですか？
例えば人類の文明、科学などは何もかもが自然の模倣だ。最初だけが本物というなら、ある意味全てが偽物。つまり我々は偽物であることを武器に世界の支配者になり上がったのだよ。
じゃあ成田も偽仲間ですね。
私は最初から偽学生だと思う。昔狼に育てられた少女というものがいた。発見されたその子は姿こそ人だったが、まるで狼だったそうだ。
それは
人の心を持っていなかったということだよ。人の心、愛や悲しみを本能だというものもいる。だが私は心もまた学んでいくものだと思う。偽物も時には本物が思いもよらぬことをする。黒船の理事長室のプレートのように。
あの変な記号っぽいやつ？
Yes, the Pioneer plaque which represented an unfulfilled dream.
あれは星の彼方に自分たちの心を託して投じたものだ。いつか誰かが拾ってくれることを祈って。 本物もそんなことまでは思いもよらなかっただろうね。黒船の生き方も考え方も私は認めないが、一つだけ同意できるところがある。
何ですか？世界を支配してやるぜとかですか？
HMI を可能性と呼んだことだ。
He'd claimed that possibilities were something we made ourselves. Value wasn't decided by whether something was real or fake, but the actions of those with a strong will. Eru fulfilling her promise and saving Saku was a perfect example.
私もエルもサクも誰も同じだよ。それが言いたかった。
意味不明ですよ。
そうだろう。私の思考は深淵ということだ。
Eru laughed for the first time in days. I couldn't tell whether she was infected by my smile or not. Whatever the case, we both laughed for no apparent reason. Whether Eru's smile was real or fake, seeing it made me happy. And that was more than enough.
だから我々は皆、今の一瞬一瞬を大切に生きていくのだよ。
ポエマー黙ってろ。
I decided to reevaluate my motivation. And if that reignited my passion, I planned to fulfill all that remained of my solemn oath. What would I do after that? The answer to that question seemed rather obvious. I would be reborn as a new Shinrin Narita. Even if one way of life had been closed off, as long as I drew breath, I had to find a new path forward. As we burst into laughter, Tamao spoke up.
お前ら何言ってんだ？
漫画フターマンの話です。
I mean, I don't know what they're talking about, but I mean, it's really like heartwarming to see Narita like laughing and like genuinely coming from his heart. Soriko and Taigi joined in.
何事も笑って送り出すというだろう。
ニュアンスが違うと思う。
Saku had left, but the thing she wished to protect most still remained.
今、何かカッコつけたキモいことを考えていたでしょう。
無論だ。私は常にかっこいい。
No.
処置なしです。
Wow, they're gonna end it like that, huh? Can't end it off on like a really sweet note. They gotta put a little bit of a back and forth joking at the end. Can we talk about that? That was a good route, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first. Like for a while, I was like, this route's really slow. It started off good, and I was like, I don't know, it's kind of whatever, right? But wow, okay, that route got intense very quick. I mean, the whole route was good. I'm not saying there was parts where I thought it was really bad. It's just there was definitely parts of that route that were better than others. And this whole ending here was great. Just awesome. Like that, if they would have just ended the game right there and said that's all the content, like I would have been satisfied. But wow. Just seeing the progression with Eru was really nice, because I feel like she's a character I didn't really know too well. You know, I kind of say that every time I go through a girl's route. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't know her too well. And then, you know, going through her route, wow, surprisingly, it gave me a lot of information about the character, right? But it was interesting because it was a route that really didn't focus too much on Eru at times. Like, it did and it didn't. Like, towards this end here, it focused on Saku. But it focused on Saku because Saku is, like, so important to Eru, right? But wow, I mean, I was happy with that. There's a lot of good character progression. Like it's making me like characters who I didn't really care about before. Like Taigi of all people, I didn't really care about Taigi. Y'all know that if you've been watching me. But it was nice to see different sides of him and him kind of making sacrifices to help Saku.
とある男と女の誕生の物語である。
I am going to look at those at some point. I want to look at all those and I want to do it back to back. But, you know, guys, that was Eru Takazaki's route. Really cool to see what her power was. It was very interesting. I'm actually very surprised by that, and I think that's actually a really cool power. Kind of like Soriko's. I didn't have any idea what Soriko's was. I was like, oh, Soriko's not that strong, right? You know, that's what they want you to think. It's actually funny, because I think the person who's probably the weakest is Tamao, and Tamao is the one with the most strongest physical ability, right? I think that's very ironic. They've really, like, flipped what I feel like should be the case on its head. So this game, in that sense, is great. Like, I absolutely love that. Anyways, guys, I mean, we are going to be doing Saku Otonashi's route. I feel like we just did Saku Otonashi's route, because it focused so much on her at the end. But I'm excited to see where they're going to go with it. I hope it'll go a little bit different. I don't know if they're going to use the same kind of plot line right there, if they're going to use where she has onslaught syndrome, if we're going to have to deal with that, or how that's going to work, because I feel like they've already did that idea. I don't want them to do it again, but I hope that we're able to grow close to Saku, because this is going to be the last route before we start going into the new division routes, right? And then we're going to do the superior one, which I believe is the final, like, true ending. But lots of good stuff coming up. I mean, we only have a few more routes to go. I feel like I'm about halfway now. Really excited. Like, this has been wonderful. Really good game. But anyways, guys, I will shut up for now until the next route. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.